You are a time bomb. Tick, tick, tick.
Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. My name is Merge, and welcome to the Breaking Bad What If series that I call the Heisenverse, a series where I make a change somewhere in the Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul timeline and explore how that change ripples throughout the entire universe. And in this video, we explored the idea of Mike surviving Walter's attempt on his life towards the end of the episode Say My Name. One of the most heartbreaking deaths in the series in my opinion, for the simple fact that he was killed because he just hurt Walter's feelings. Crazy, right? But what if Mike was able to escape? How would his survival change the Breaking Bad timeline? Well, if you could leave a like on this video to support the channel, I'd appreciate it. And without wasting any more time, let's get into it.
You just had to blow it up. You and your pride and your ego. You just had to be the man. If you'd done your job, known your place, we'd all be fine right now.
After that exchange, Walter in a fit of rage marches over to Mike's car, and before Mike can react, Walter using the same gun from the go bag shoots Mike through the window, hitting him and shattering the glass. But instead of being fatally wounded, Mike would be hit in the left shoulder, still causing him to slam on the gas pedal and peel out, but in this version he's able to escape Walter. And while aiming his gun at Mike's escaping car, Walter will be shocked at what he's just done, but that shock quickly turns into anger as he watches Mike escape. And once Mike is out of his field of vision, Walter would snap out of his anger to pull out his phone and make a call to Todd, saying as he gets in his car,
Todd, I think it's time I meet your uncle.
As for Mike, he'd keep driving until he gets across the border and head right over to Gus's doctor to get himself patched up and lay low for the time being, which is the best place for him right now, being that the DEA is after him and now he has to worry about Walter. But this is Mike we're talking about, so we know that he can handle whatever Walter throws his way, including Jack and his crew, especially since he's already done his research on them.
It's true, though, he does have some connections. Didn't worry me then. He's just flexing.
We then pick up with Walter meeting Jack at his compound, and he hires them to take care of Mike and basically be his bodyguards until Mike is found. And after a couple days of searching, Walter asks for an update, but Jack has nothing to report. And then he'd ask Walter if he has someone or something that they can use to lure Mike out. And just for a moment, Walter considers using Mike's granddaughter, Kaylee, but after what happened with Brock, he never involved children again. Instead, Walter opts to have Mike's 9 guys killed to take care of his loose ends, which would also be an attempt to lure Mike out. But in the eyes of Jesse and Saul, they would believe that Walter killed Mike, especially after he gave that order. But after nearly a month of having a Gus level of paranoia, there is still no sign of Mike, and Walter is forced to shift his focus to the problem at hand, that being Hank. And things only get worse when Jesse finds out the truth about Brock, and after the failed attempt to burn down Walter's house, he yet again hires Jack and his crew, but this time to take care of Jesse. And with his focus being divided between his former partner and his brother-in-law with no clue that they're working together, Walter is unable to anticipate the skill of his other former business partner who everyone believes is dead. And Mike uses Walter's plan to his advantage by keeping out of the public eye, and he was also able to use his resources to stay one step ahead of him, like installing those bugs in his house when he's not home and even using the gas cap tracker on Walter's car. And even though Mike is aware of the hit that had been put out on him, he's still able to evade Jack and his crew easily. But similar to Gus, Walter is nearly impossible to catch off guard. But that all changed when Walter received a call from Jesse saying that he found his money, which made Walter drop everything to meet Jesse out in the desert. But little does he know, Mike is right behind him. And as Walter nearly makes it to the desert location, Mike would take a different route to set up and get in position, just in case Walter has backup that's not far behind. And when Walter arrives, he quickly hops out the car and begins looking around for Jesse, still with his phone to his ear. And just out in the distance, Mike has Walter in his crosshair, and right as he's about to pull the trigger, he sees an SUV approaching. And seeing Walter hide behind rocks, Mike would take his finger off the trigger to observe the situation. And to his surprise, he sees Hank, Gomez, and Jesse in the same car, but after hearing the echoes of Hank saying, Mike decides that Walter going to prison would be a fitting end for him, as he says to himself, "Rot, you son of a bitch." And as Mike continues to watch Walter getting cuffed and put in the back of the car, he then notices 2 more vehicles approaching the area, which turns out to be Jack and his crew, and Mike can already see what's about to happen as the gang gets out with their guns drawn. And all he can do is watch through his sniper scope as the 2 agents take on the neo-Nazis in a deadly shootout that ends with Gomez dead and Hank wounded. And once the shooting stops, Mike watches as the gang slowly approaches the wounded Hank, and as Walter pleads for his brother-in-law's life, Todd gets him out the car. But with Jack's mind made up even after the $80 million offer made by Walter, Hank is now staring down the barrel of the gun, waiting for death. And then the sound of a gunshot can be heard echoing through the desert. And to everyone's surprise, Jack's body falls in front of Hank with a bullet hole that came out the back of his head through the front. And then suddenly the shooting starts right back up again as the gang is being picked off one by one as they duck for cover and fire randomly at the mystery gunmen. And even Walter and Hank try to find cover, but with Hank shot in the leg and Walter handcuffs, they're both sitting ducks as they watch the bodies fall around them. And when the shooting finally stops, Walter pokes his head up and calls out for Hank, checking if he's still alive. But Hank doesn't respond, and when Walter sits up, he can see him crawling towards Jack's body, likely for his gun. And Walter says in a panic, "Hank! Hank, did you see where the shots came from?" As he looks around at all the death. But not too far away from him, maybe like 20 feet, he spots Todd on the ground bleeding from his stomach. And before Walter can say another word, he is suddenly frozen with fear at who he sees approaching just a few feet behind Todd. Mike Ehrmantraut, dressed in camo with a gun in his hand. And as he walks past Todd, completely ignoring him, not even glancing down, Mike instead walks over to Hank and puts his boot down on the gun that he was crawling towards. And when Hank looks up and he sees the stern face of Mike, Hank has a visible look of confusion on his face. Mike would then turn his attention to Hank's wounded leg and then Walter, who is just trembling at this point. And without saying a word, he would kneel down in front of Hank to get the gun away from him. He then pulls the belt off Jack's corpse to give it to Hank to make a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. Mike then stands up and begins walking in Walter's direction, still with the gun drawn. And Walter starts begging for his life as Mike approaches, saying, Now Mike, please, you don't have to do this, please." And Mike, still not saying a word, passes Walter and heads over to his car, removing the gas cap and then knocking on the roof before saying, "You can come out now, kid," referring to Jesse, who's still under the car. And once Jesse gets up, he looks at Mike like he just seen a ghost, then glaring at Walter, who's staring right back at him with fear in his eyes. And Jesse says while squinting his eyes at Mike, So what happens now?" gesturing to the bloodbath around him. "I'll tell you on the way, kid. Come on," Mike says to Jesse as they walk back towards the two brother-in-laws. And once in front of Hank and Walter, Mike drops a burner phone in front of Hank and tells him, "Call in the cavalry and tell them you have a wounded suspect." And before anyone can react, Mike would shoot the handcuffed Walter in the shoulder, nearly in the same spot Walter shot Mike, causing him to crowd in agony on the desert sand. And as the two begin walking away, Jesse looks back at his former partner rolling on the ground in pain, and he gives a slight smirk before turning his back on Heisenberg for good. And before leaving the scene, Mike stands over Todd, who's still clutching at his wound, and he gives a look of disgust before pulling the hammer back on his gun and firing, officially putting an end to the gang. Afterwards, Mike fills Jesse in on what happened between him and Walter and the plan going forward as they speed over to Saul's office. If he doesn't bleed out, Walter is going to prison, and we need to be gone sooner rather than later before that happens, because we both know that he won't hesitate to throw one of us under the bus, clearly. Okay, right, well, I have an idea, but we have to make a stop at my house first, Jesse says to Mike because, side note, before Jesse went and threw his money out the window, let's just say that he stashed away like $1 million in his house for a quote, rainy day fund.
Rainy day fund.
So after getting the money from Jesse's house, they arrive at Saul's office, and right now he's in the middle of shredding papers and destroying evidence. So when Mike and Jesse come in his office, he is in utter shock to see Mike, just like Jesse was, but Mike would quickly cut to the chase, telling him, "Saul, in less than 24 hours, the cops are going to be all over you, so I need you to tell me about this disappearing service that the kid was talking about." And Saul's eyes grow big before rushing to his safe to pull out the vacuum repair card. And after explaining the service to them, when the topic of money is brought up, Jesse would drop a duffel bag filled with money in front of Saul. And within the hour, the three remaining accomplices go their separate ways to begin their new lives. Where would they go? Well, for Saul and Jesse, that's easy. But for Mike, I'd say he'd go somewhere like Utah or Wyoming, somewhere far enough from the eyes of the law, but close enough to keep an eye on Kaylee. And just like that, they're all gone in the wind. Back with Walter and Hank, after the police arrive, they're both hospitalized, with Walter being sedated and handcuffed to a hospital bed until he comes to. As for Hank, he's in the next room finishing up giving his statement to ASAC Marquette and the other officers, and he's also handcuffed to a bed as well. Because yeah, he finally did catch Walter dead to rights, but not only does he have no evidence, but his partner's dead, Jesse and Mike are gone, and because he was basically working off the books, his reason for being there begins to look a little suspicious. And once Walter regains consciousness, the police are eager to hear what he has to say. But after being shot and now finding himself handcuffed to a hospital bed, Walter plays the confusion card, and he tries to stall for as long as he could to come up with a version of the truth that still allows for him to walk away. But the only option he has right now is the nuclear one, his confession tape. And on the inside, Walter truly did not want to use this option, but this is the only way. And after seeing Mike and Jesse just walk away after what happened in the desert, he considers that betrayal, and that's not something that he's just gonna let go. Walter wants revenge, and if Hank has to go down so he can get it, so be it. Because in his mind, what he said to Saul applies to his two former partners as well.
We're done when I say we're done.
So after Walter's confession, initially there are a lot of doubts, but after the actual tape was viewed, there would be one last nail in the coffin for Hank, and that was the fact that Walter and Skylar paid his medical bills, which was the one thing that Hank didn't have: proof. So even though they essentially told the same story, basically pointing the finger at each other, that one detail was enough to tip the scales in Walter's favor. So after a lengthy court battle, the jury convicts Hank Schrader on all charges, from drug distribution to murder, and he's given life in a maximum security prison for his quote Heisenberg crimes. And Walter is able to walk away scot-free. But even though he has his freedom, his family wants nothing to do with him, something that's known right away when Skylar files for divorce and takes the kids and moves in with Marie. And in the beginning, Walter wouldn't even care, being too fixated on finding Mike and Jesse, a search that leads him nowhere for months. But in a last-ditch effort, he would even visit Ed to disappear and try bribing him for information, and when that doesn't work, he even attempts to threaten him. But Ed tells him plainly, "Mr. White, if you truly value your freedom, you would leave my shop and never come back," he says while reaching for his phone, and Walter responds in an arrogant tone, "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" I think we both know exactly who I'm talking to. Ed says, holding eye contact for a moment before continuing the dial on his phone. And seeing that he has no influence over Ed and he really doesn't want to get involved with the police again, Walter leaves the store in a huff. And for nearly half a year, Walter completely ignores his family in lieu of spending his time, money, and resources to find Jesse and Mike. And after all that time, he's no closer than when he first started. And his pursuit for revenge transforms into ongoing paranoia. So in the attempt to make amends with his family and also bring himself some peace of mind, Walter buys a brand new house with his car wash money and hopes to win his family back. But he's just a little too late for that. Maybe if he focused on his family in the beginning, he could have maybe won over Walter Jr., but now, after everything that's happened with Hank, Walter's family feels the same way about him that they did during the original finale, which is basically waiting for him to die, and they're not even scared to let him know that either.
Wait for what? What are you waiting for?
For the cancer to come back.
Just die!
Go ahead and die then.
So after numerous attempts to reconcile with his family, Walter sits alone in his fancy new house, now a paranoid mess in a shell of his former self, with more money than he can ever spend and the head of an empire that he can never claim, and a single bullet that's still lodged in his shoulder serving as a reminder of his greatest failure, the revenge that he can never have. And the whole reason for all of this, the lies, the murder, everything, was all for his family who wants nothing to do with him. So as his cancer gets worse with every passing day, and the thought of Mike and Jesse coming back to finish him off, Walter is just tired. And he decides to call the DEA to give a real confession, and before hanging up, he gives the police his location. He then picks up his .38 snub that's on the table near the same watch that Jesse gifted him. And as he hears the sirens in the distance, he takes one more look at the framed family photo of him, Skylar, and Walter Jr. And with his last bit of strength, Walter turns a gun on himself, and then... Seconds later, the police barge into the house only to find a lifeless Walter with blood splattered on the wall behind him, and they see that he's surrounded by 6 barrels filled with millions of dollars of drug money, and a written confession and a lottery ticket on top of one of the barrels. And upon closer inspection, the lottery ticket has Walter Jr.'s name on it. And if you're keeping track with me at home, you know that in the original there were 7 barrels, meaning that there's still 1 barrel out there. And after the police gather all the evidence, which is more than enough to absolve Hank of all charges, Skylar and Marie will be the first to hear the news, but not one tear will be shed for Walter's death, only a sigh of relief. And many, many, many miles away in different areas of the country, Saul, Jesse, and Mike would catch the breaking news story of the true identity of the drug kingpin Heisenberg, who's been revealed to be former high school chemistry teacher Walter Hartwell White, who was found dead at home with a self-inflicted gunshot to the head. I suppose the only good thing to come out of this is the fact that Jesse was never aware of Walter letting Jane die, and although he broke things off with Andrea, with Todd out the picture, her and Brock can live their lives in peace. So in the end, even after evading prison, Walter White still lost everything because he just couldn't let go, leaving one question on the mind of everyone. Was it worth it? Hey everybody, I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed this story from the Heisenverse. And yes, as you can see, I am capable of making a story where I don't kill Jesse, but that is likely to change depending on the material. And if this is your first video of mine and you're watching this, that is an inside joke. Watch a few more videos and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But now I want to hear from you guys. What did you guys think of this story? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think I could do better? Whatever it is, let me know down below in the comments. And also let me know what story I should do next, and I'll do my best to respond. Until then, my name is Merge. Later.